So everybody always says, I absolutely remember how to pipette. Well, the number one reason people's shit doesn't work when they come back in the fall is they don't know how to pipette. So we're going to remind you how to do that. So one, what is the right pipette for the job? If you remember, we've got 5 different pipettes in the lab, and the numbers that are important are the smallest volume is 1/10 of what the pipette can hold. The maximum amount it can hold is the number that's printed on the button, and they're most accurate at exactly half the value. So the P20 is more accurate at 10 microliters than the P10. Might not be intuitive, but it's true. The second thing is how to set one of these pipettes. Remember, you use the knob to change the setting, but before you can do that, you have to unlock it. Then you can turn the dial until the setting is what you want, like 100 microliters. So that says 100. Lock the pipette again, it's ready to use. Tips. In the lab, we have different sizes of tips, right? The biggest of the tips fit the P1000. The smallest of the tips, like these, fit both the 10 and the 2. And for non-filtered tips, these tips fit both the P200, which I'm holding, and the P20, just in different ways, right?
Where would you find the size on the containers?
You can't. You find it by looking at the tips. Why am I saying, oh, it's printed right on the container right here? It's like, yes. And this pipette container says it's for 20 to 40 microliter pipettes. But because these were refilled by the tip elves, these tips are also good for the P200. So if you get the tip size by just looking at the container, you'll go all over the lab looking for tips when you're holding the right tips in your hands. So judge what kind of tips used by looking at them, unless you're using filter tips. The P200 and the P20, even though the plastic tip is the same, use different tips because of how the filter sits on these 2 different pipettes. So you need 2 different kinds of tips for the P20 and the P200, okay? When do we use filter tips, right? The easiest way to think about whether you use filter tips or regular tips is because most of the time you use regular tips. The only times you'll ever use filter tips is 1, if you're actually doing PCR, 2, if you're doing cell culture, where we have a higher level of sterility, so you're working with the animal cells, and 3 is if you're working with RNA. And if you're not doing one of those 3 things, you don't need filter tips. Okay? So, when you use one of these pipettes, you put a tip on, and the proper way to use one of these pipette tips is to hold it at a 45-degree angle, always. Pipette the liquid by sticking this into the container. When you're pipetting, the amount that's set on the pipette is the amount of air that gets pushed out. If you push this down to the place where you're met with resistance, what we sometimes call the first stop, common mistake is that people just push the button down random amounts. You'll get random amounts of liquid if you do that. Push it down to the first stop, stick the tip into the liquid, let the button out as slowly as you can, slide the tip along the lip of the container when you're taking it out, stop and look at the tip. Does this look like the right amount of liquid? On some of our tips, there's actually little lines on the tip that are roughly the right amount. So I'm pipetting 100 microliters, the liquid lines up with a line. If it doesn't, there's something seriously wrong with me or my tips, right, or the pipetter. So stop, ask somebody for help. Same for delivering stuff into your tube. If you have an empty tube, you just add your liquid to the tube. When you get to that first stop, push a little bit further while you're pulling the tip away to blow a little bit of extra air out. And and then examine the tip and make sure it's empty. Second most common mistake is people forgetting to remove the tip from the liquid that they've just pipetted before they let the button out, and when they look at the tip, there's liquid in it. So don't do that. Okay. Finally, getting rid of tips. I just use this tip to pipette something that's not alive, right? It's water or a buffer or DNTPs or primers or DNA. It goes in the waste. If I've been working with bacteria, something that's alive, like an E. coli culture before I added the P2, or some material that I just took out of the cell culture incubator, some living animal cells, then those tips go in the biohazard waste. This bag is full of stuff. Most of what's in this bag does not belong there. So don't be that person.